Everybody. Oh, very good to see everyone. We are learning. If you want to find a text, it is available online and, of course, in books. We are currently learning the Rambam, Hilchos Beis Habechira, Perek Aleph, the first chapter in the laws of the Beis Hamikdash. And we are continuing Halacha Daled, Halacha number 4, and I want to do 5 as well today, 4 and 5. Have an idea that has fascinated me for many years, and in fact I've spoken about it in shul as well because of the curiosity. So first I'm going to read Halacha Daled. Binyan Shebana Shlomo. The structure, the building that Shlomo HaMelech built when he built the temple. If you want to know how that is made, Kvar Mefarsh B'Melachim. You can look it up, open up a Bible, and read the opening few chapters of the Book of Kings, and you will read all about the structure and the size and the shape of the building that Shlomo HaMelech built. Next, V'chein binyan ha'asid libanos. What about the future temple? The Rambam, of course, takes it for granted, as it is known. There will be a Beis Hamikdash that will be built by Mashiach, like we discussed a few classes ago. Afal pisha hu kosu b'Yechezkel. This temple is described in the book of Ezekiel. Perek in the Navi, the prophet, some 4 chapters extensively detailing the third Beis Hamikdash. And if you want to look it up there, open up a Bible in Yechezkel, Ezekiel, chapters 40, 41, 42, and 43. However, even though there is a good amount of description there, the Rambam says, with something which is obvious to anyone who has read those chapters, even though it's 4 whole chapters, there's a lot that's unclear, meaning someone reading it is not going to get a clear picture of what the Beis Hamikdash looked like. There is a beautiful diagram that ArtScroll made in their commentary on Yechezkel, which describes the structure, which differs considerably from the structure of the Beis Hamikdash. Familiar with it, the second Beis Hamikdash, which is described in Masechta Midos, for example, and which the Rambam will describe a little bit later. Yechezkel's structure, Yechezkel's building is very different. However, because it's unclear, the Rambam explains, V'anshe Bais Sheni, the people who came back, the Jews who returned to build the temple after the 70 years, Kishabonu b'Yimei Ezra, it was in the days of Ezra that they rebuilt the temple. Banuhu kibinyan Shlomo, they built it using what they knew from Shlomo HaMelech's temple, what we call the first temple, including within it, however, elements that are clear from Yechezkel's description. So I want to discuss this for a moment, because this addresses a very interesting historical anomaly, which has been, I'll say it's been forgotten. I don't think it's done something wrong, but I think there is a common misunderstanding when dealing with Sefer Yechezkel and what I would call the end of the Bible. And that is that the original hope, and it's clear there's a more in Brachos that says this as well, the original hope was that when the Jews would return from their 70-year exile, the reason they would return is because Mashiach is coming, meaning the Jews are in Galus, and they're now coming back. Mashiach is going to come, he's going to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, and this Beis Hamikdash will be permanent and will last forever. This was not meant to be, and we are now very familiar in the world of what I'll call Jewish eschatology, discussions of Mos HaMoshiach, the idea that Mashiach is there to build the third temple. But there we have drawn the line, meaning there's not going to be a third temple which will then be destroyed by some other nation, and then a fourth temple, meaning the third temple, by Shlishi, that's it. However, the original descriptions of the Beis Hamikdash by Yechezkel, and not only the Beis Hamikdash, but the world that Yechezkel describes, the world that Yeshaya describes, what life will be like when the Jews return from exile, that is what they hoped with all their heart, and what many Jews hoped with all their heart, would be Yemos HaMashiach. So Yechezkel's description was of what we call Bais Shlishi. But to him, it wasn't Bais Shlishi. It was with an expectation, a tikva, a hope that everything would be included in Beis Sheni. The second Beis Hamikdash would be the permanent Beis Hamikdash. And there are many psukim that make this clear, and like I said, there are even gemaras that make it clear. So now, what's happening? They come back, and then they discover, for reasons which I'll discuss briefly now, but deserve a shir all on its own, that their return after the 70 years is imperfect. The way the Gemara describes it, and it somewhat resonates with many Jews nowadays, many Jews opted to remain in Bavel. It was a minority of the Jews who chose to return to Eretz Yisrael. First, when Koresh, the Persian king, told them to go back, and then even when it took a few years and Ezra was willing to go back, it was a minority, meaning millions of Jews were exiled from the land, and clearly millions were lost from the 10 tribes, for example. And then I think the number of Jews who chose to return numbered in the tens of thousands. I believe there's a record somewhere in Navi, I can't recall where right now, we're in Suvim, that the number was somewhere between 40 and 50,000 Jews who returned. And this is how it would remain for the entire time of the second Beis Hamikdash. There was a minority of Jews that chose to come back. So the second Beis Hamikdash remained an imperfect reflection. And this is something that's very important when reading about the history of the second Beis Hamikdash, is to realize that it was a broken return. And since it was a broken, incomplete, damaged return, the second Beis Hamikdash did not reflect all of the hopes that Yechezkel put into it. And one of the ways that this is understood is that, okay, what do we do now? What kind of temple do we rebuild? They had no guidance. The words seemed unclear to them. So this is, in a way, the tragedy of Beis Sheni, which is reflected in many halachos. And to understand the tragedy of Beis Sheni, anyone who can learn Mishnayos of Sefta Yoma, dealing with Yom Kippur, you realize how damaged the second Beis Hamikdash was. However, that's all we have, and that is the best description we have, because the leaders during the second Beis Hamikdash took copious notes on what the second Beis Hamikdash looked like, and the Rambam in the chapters to come, when he describes what the Beis Hamikdash is, he's really describing the second Beis Hamikdash. So that's as far as understanding 1, 2, and 3. So the idea is that the first one was the most ideal example that we have, meaning that Shlomo built it, and it was as perfect as it could be. And then the second Beis Hamikdash was created in a void of prophecy. There were 3 remaining prophets from the first temple who were there to guide them. However, their guidance was incomplete. They couldn't even explain what it is that Yechezkel said. And then we have the third Beis Hamikdash, which will be, in a way, made by human hands, but assisted by Kadosh Baruch Hu and Mashiach. And that will be the perfect model. And then everyone will understand what Yechezkel was talking about. Okay, let's move on. So now that we understand that there are 3 architectural plans for the Beis Hamikdash. There's Shlomo's plan, which was built but then destroyed. There is Yechezkel's plan, which is the Beis Hamikdash of Mashiach. And then there is a third plan, which is what was the second Beis Hamikdash, which was some hodgepodge combination of Shlomo's and Yechezkel's, and that's how they made it. However, even though there are 3 clearly the 3 blueprints share a lot. And the Rambam now describes in the next halacha, in halacha Hey, what it takes to be considered the Beis Hamikdash. Even though there are differences in the architecture, there are obviously similarities in the architecture that all 3 Batei Mikdash had. So here the Rambam describes what are the essentials. Ve'elu shein ikar b'binyan habayis. If you want to know, here are the things that are considered the mainstays, the landmarks, if you will, of what is considered a valid Beis Hamikdash. Osin bo kodesh, v'kodesh kadashim. V'yeh lifnei hakodesh makom echad v'hu nikra ulam. So he says, first of all, there is a building. This building is comprised of 3 parts. What are the 3 parts? So 2 of the parts we're familiar with because they're described in Chumash. There is one room that he says is called the Kodesh. There is a room further in called the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy and the Holy of Holies in English. In Latin, the Sanctum and the Sanctum Sanctorum. Strange, but that's the term. And then the Rambam says, and this is what I want to focus on, what I'm going to want to focus on tonight a little bit, is he says there's a third room. What is this third room? The third room is a place, an entry space, before entering the Kodesh. He says, and that is called a Ulam. An Ulam is best translated as a hall. It's an entry hall, and that was called a Ulam. Ushloshtan, these three rooms, so remember, when you walk in the front door, it's an Ulam. Then you enter the next space, that's called the Kodesh. The third space, which we'll learn only the Kohen Gadol would walk in on Yom Kippur, is called the Kodesh Kadosh. These three rooms together are called a Heichal. Heichal meaning a sanctuary, a sacred space. This sanctuary is one building composed of three essential rooms. Around this Heichal, around the sanctuary, a mechitza was made, a wall around it, but not directly around it. A wall which allowed for space. If you want to know how much space, there has to be at least as much space as there was in the Mishkan Shahayu Bamidbar that existed in the desert, which is, the Gemara says, is 100 amos by 50 amos. So you have 5,000 square amos of space. And this 5,000 of space, square amos of space, was surrounded by a wall. What do you call this space that is surrounded by these walls? This is the equivalent of what existed in the Torah, was described as the courtyard around the Ohel Moed, which is the Torah's description for what later would be called the Heichal. Vuhu nikra Azara. This is what is called in the language of Halacha the Azara, the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. V'hakol, and all of this together, nikra Mikdash. That is what is called the Mikdash. So he says, what is the Beis Hamikdash? In its barest form, that all three Batei Mikdash, all three temples, the first, the second, and soon the third, what do they all have in common? What is a Beis Hamikdash? He says the Beis Hamikdash is a building. The building has three rooms. Ulam, Kodesh, Kodesh, Kodashim. The building is located in a walled-off yard that is called the Azara, which is the equivalent of the Azara of the Chatzar that existed in the Mishkan of the Torah. What I would like to discuss now is the one part that always troubled me, and if you have a curiosity, it should interest you as well, because I find it's a fascinating puzzle. And that is that anyone who goes through the parshas of the Torah, let's say you don't know about the Beis Hamikdash, you're not familiar with the architecture of the Beis Hamikdash, but you hear the parsha every year. You go through the parshas, Truma, Tetzaveh, Vayakel, Pekudei, you read Sefer Vayikra, you're familiar with the structure of the Beis Hamikdash. There's one piece of what I just read that should disturb you. And that is this room that the Rambam calls the Ulam, the hall. The hall has no equivalent in Moshe Rabbeinu's Mishkan. If you go through all of the parshas of the Torah that describe the Mishkan, there's nothing that is the equivalent. Meaning, there is a curtain that leads into the Mishkan, and when you enter that curtain, you are in the room called the Kodesh. There's the other curtain, and then you move that curtain, you're in the Kodesh Kodashim. So that the Mishkan of Chumash had a Kodesh and Kodesh Kodashim. However, the Heichal of the Beis Hamikdash, Shlomo's, Ezra's, Yechezkel's, that has three rooms. So here's my question. Where did the Ulam come from? Now, obviously, the easy answer, and this is provided, Rav Chaim Kanievsky says as much in the commentary that he wrote called Das Chachma, a commentary on the Rambam's these halachos. He says it was obviously a halacha Moshe Misina, because nothing that Shlomo Melech did happened without it being in David HaMelech's blueprints. And David HaMelech's blueprints were all authorized and approved by the Nevi'im. So anything that David and Shlomo did Hamikdash it's understood, it's a given that all of it is on some level, even though we were never told, it's a halacha l'Moshe Misina. Halacha l'Moshe Misina means that there was a tradition that they had on how to build the Beis Hamikdash. On most of the things, if you all the descriptions that we've heard of the Beis Hamikdash, the Beis Hamikdash is a larger, more expanded, a bigger, more permanent version of the Mishkan. It's like the Mishkan, but bigger. The one major exception to this is the Ulam, because the Beis Hamikdash had many things that the Mishkan didn't have. You go through Masechta Midos that describes there were so many rooms and halls, and there was a dressing room, and there was a room to cook the meat, and there was another room to sew the clothes, and there was another room for the bakery. But those things are not the essential features of a Beis Hamikdash. Because if for whatever reason the Beis Hamikdash didn't have a changing room or didn't have a didn't have a bakery, it would be figured out because necessity would demand it. However, the elements that the Rambam just described here in Halacha Hey are more than that. This is essential. If you don't have these parts, you do not have a Beis Hamikdash. So here's the question: where did the Ulam come from? That's my question. So here's my answer. It's an incomplete answer. I will tell you right off the bat, I am not happy. I am not satisfied with this answer. I hope to be satisfied one day. And if anyone has any more clues and you're watching this, I would like to hear what you have to say. And my theory is like this, that the Ulam is a hall that is required by the nature of the space of this large building. As we will see later, the Beis Hamikdash was huge, meaning the entire structure went 100 amos one way by 100 amos the other way. That's between 150 to 200 at the front and 150 to 200 feet from north to south. So the Kodesh and Kodesh Kodashim itself were much smaller rooms within that large building. So why do you need a hall? Because it is, no pun intended, the hallmark of a proper Kedusha. If you remember, when the Rambam spoke about the permanence of the Beis Hamikdash, in Halacha Aleph, he said that the original structures that Moshe Rabbeinu created and that later Yehoshua built are defined by the pasuk that says, Moshe Rabbeinu tells them, Ki levasem ad ata el hamenucha v'lanachal. You have not yet arrived to your place of rest, meaning to your permanent and what will be your ancestral permanent location. That is only served by the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim. What this means is that for something to be considered permanent, for something to be considered what I would call settled down, like the English expression, I want to settle down, to have that element of permanence, which is what the Beis Hamikdash is all about. It's about the permanence of Hashem's home here on earth. You need an ulam. What does it mean you need a hall? What does it mean a hall, a hallway, an entrance space? Most homes have an entrance space of some kind, a little room where maybe you can put your coats before you actually enter the house. What's so important about this one, so much so that the Gemara says that you're not allowed to build a building nowadays that has the same dimensions as the Beis Hamikdash. So to create a room that has 30 amos, for example, of length and with exactly 10 amos of width, that space, that is not allowed nowadays. That's only the space of the Beis Hamikdash. What's the Ulam? The Ulam is the sense of permanence that you get by having the ability to be at rest and to walk into a space without having to worry. What do I mean by worry? So let me put it this way. Even in the Mishkan itself, if you look at the structure of the Mishkan and the way that it's described in the, for example, the Mefarshim, there are some famous brises that describe the Mishkan. There's one brisa called Meleches HaMishkan, which was made more popular recently, again, because Reb Chaim Kanievsky wrote a parish on it. And he says that when you walked into the Kodesh, What was in the Kodesh? There were 3 items that were in the Kodesh, which will be discussed soon. There was the incense altar, the Mizbach HaKetores, there was the menorah, and there was the Shulchan. The table that had the 12 loaves of bread, the menorah, the 7-branch menorah, and the incense altar. However, if you read the descriptions of the Mishkan, what you will read is that in this very large room, which was 20 amos long, so let's imagine walking 30 feet, those 3 items of furniture, golden altar, menorah, and table, were only in the second half of that room. Now that creates quite an image. Imagine you walk into a room and there's space, and you walk and you walk and you walk and you walk before you actually get to what you think the room is for. Think about any image that people have of a wealthy, powerful person who has an office. The office can be very large, but how does it work? You have a room, and the person who is at his desk or at his throne is all the way at the other end. That is a powerful image. If you want to know the best human example of this that we have from Tanakh, Megillas Esther. Megillas Esther describes the various chambers and rooms that it took to get all the way to Achashverosh. And as the Zohar says, that everything about Achashverosh and Shushan is supposed to be understood also as an allegory for Hashem and the Beis Hamikdash. So that you had the inner chamber of the king, that's where he had his golden scepter, that's the equivalent of the Kodesh Kodashim. Then you had the room outside, and that's, for example, where he met with Esther and with Haman. That was another room. And then you had the garden outside of that, Ginas Bisan Hamelach, that was even outside. Before you have Ir Shushan, that represents the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash, and Harabayas, and then Yerushalayim itself. So everything is, if we think about it, concentric circles, except here it's not circles, but just one level, and then another level, and then another level, and then another level. And that is the sense, and this is understood as what Kedusha is all about. Meaning, in the language of the Torah, Kedusha is something that has many levels. People who are familiar with video games are very familiar with this nowadays in the computer gaming world, where level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. Here, what we're having, lahavdil, the description that we have in Chumash, and then later with the Beis Hamikdash in Nach, is that there are different levels, and when do you get to that next level? So the Beis Hamikdash had these levels, and this is described in many Mishnayos that describe 10 levels of Kedusha that existed from Eretz Yisrael, meaning the entire land of Israel, was level number 10, until you got to the Kodesh Kodashim, which was level 1. The Ulam was its own level. And it is the level, and excuse me for going so long about this, but I really want to make this clear to myself. It's the level of understanding the Kedusha of Hachana. What is Hachana? Hachana is preparation. However, preparation should not be understood merely as something before the main event. By having a room called the Ulam, it is inside the Heichal. It is in the sanctuary itself. And yet it is only an entranceway before entering the Kodesh, where the Avoda, where the service was done. This is saying that the preparation is within the Kedusha itself. The best example that I can give for this in terms of our lives, in terms of thinking about the architecture of time, is the Kedusha of Erev Shabbos. People make early Shabbos, right? We're very familiar with it, especially here in Cleveland, but throughout the East Coast of the United States, early Shabbos is a very common feature because they get so late, especially now in June and July. So there is Erev Shabbos, the Kedusha of Erev Shabbos, and then there's the Kedusha of Shabbos. So we all understand that time from Plaga Mincha, from an hour and a quarter before sunset until sunset, it's a time that could be Shabbos, but if you want, you can make Shabbos at, late Shabbos as we call it, or Shabbos on time, if you want to be pikayun about it, is that there's this space, and you can make this space holy, and this space is holy, even though it is only preparatory space. And that is the highest, most permanent level of Kedusha. And that is why the Ulam only existed in the permanent Beis Hamikdash, but the Ulam did not exist in any of the temporary formats of the Beis Hamikdash that existed beforehand. So that's my idea of Ulam. I look forward to finding over the years, as I learn more proofs to this idea. It's a very special idea and it's one that I've devoted a lot of time to, the idea of the Kedusha of preparation. Because the word preparation itself in Hebrew, hachana, one of the other Hebrew words for the language preparation, the word preparation, is the word Kedusha, v'kidashtem. Think of the Kedusha of Erev Shabbos. Think about the Kedusha of Erev Pesach, the Kedusha of Erev Yom Kippur, or the Kedusha of Erev Rosh Hashanah, that before entering a new realm of holiness, that space before the main event is also the main event. Meaning it's not just the live show before the Super Bowl starts, but it's actually part of that special moment itself. The more people realize this, the better off they are. And I'll give you one practical application in your own lives. Something that I know I can learn, and I know many people can learn this. Many people are busy. Let's say you're going to work. Or let's say you're out. And you're coming back home. And because you're a busy person, you're on your phone. And what happens? You enter your home, and you're still on the phone with whoever you were talking to in the car. Now you're entering your home. You're about to meet the members of your family, your spouse, your children. What's happening? You're on your phone. Have you entered the home? You haven't entered the home. You're still in that other universe. The highest level of love and devotion that a person can show when entering their home is that don't be on the phone when you enter your house and say, okay, I got to go now, I'm home. You might think that's a nice thing, because at least you're not going to continue the conversation the whole way. But you know the most special thing you can do? Get off the phone before you even open the door. Because once you open the door, you are now in that Ulam. And if your home is a permanent home, then the way you respect the Shekhinah, which is what emerges from your marriage and your family, is to get off the phone, get off whatever devices before you actually enter. That is the Kedusha of the Ulam. Okay, so that takes us to the end of Halacha Hey. We're going to stop there for tonight. I hope you all have a good night, or whenever you see this, a good day. And I hope to continue over the course of the next 2.5 weeks, continuing to delve in to the halachos of the Beis Hamikdash. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.